What's up, my wizards? It's Dev from Mtg. We like magic, and today we're going to look at a Rivals of Ixalan preview. That's pretty cool. We finally got one of those after like 2 weeks. So we're going to take a look at that today. I had Pauper Deck Tech all like recorded, cut for time, ready to put picture-in-picture and stuff on, but when I got a load of this preview, I was like, yeah, let's talk about that instead. That looks pretty good. Pauper video can wait a day. So we're going to talk about just one card today, but even though it's one card, it brings a lot of discussion because like there's a new mechanic that we got to see that I'm not sure I'm entirely on board with. So without further ado, let's take a look at Vona's Hunger. Well, Hunger is 3 mana, 2 and a black for an instant with Ascend. If you control 10 or more permanents, you get the City's Blessing for the rest of the game. Each opponent sacrifices a creature. If you have the City's Blessing, instead, each opponent sacrifices half the creatures he or she controls, rounded up. Hashtag bless. Okay, done with that joke. We never have to do that joke again, but in any case. Let's, I do have a lot to say about the card itself, but let me go ahead and open up here. Let's lead by talking about the actual mechanic, which is easily the most important and impactful part of the card. Well, Ascend is immediately reminiscent of the Monarch mechanic, with at least one key difference, in that it appears as though it won't, like, shift hands throughout the game. You know, you get the City's Blessing for the rest of the game, so it doesn't look like it'll, you know, shift control between players or anything. Or if you dip under 10 permanents, you won't lose the Blessing. You should still have it. Like, emblem style is what the wording of the card seems to imply. Well, if I had to gauge it, I would say that the majority of the reaction that I've seen to this card so far today has been mostly negative, you know, and the number one complaint goes something like this, you know, the card is just win more because if you already have 10 permanents in play, then you're probably ahead, so, you know, it's bad. And I don't know if that's all the way true, like, it's not entirely impossible to get 10 permanents, and it certainly doesn't mean that you're ahead just because you have 10 permanents. I mean, like, board stalls happen all the time, so it's possible. Like, games go a lot longer than a lot of people give credit for. Like, I'm one of those, like, I think sequencing is very important. What do you do turn 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all that? When do you want to win a game? But it's unrealistic to say you're gonna, you know, your plan's gonna go off, you're gonna win the game by turn 5 every time, you know. It's entirely possible, and often happens that games go really, really long and into the later turns. So it's not impossible to think you could get 10 permanents, and it's also not impossible, at least in this standard, to think that you can get 10 permanents relatively quick. You know, it counts lands, so there's that. And like in an Anointed Procession deck, you know, how hard is it? Especially if you have, like, no other creatures whatsoever, and you get, like, a turn 4 Anointed Procession into turn 5 Servo Exhibition and play a land, that's 10 permanents. Right there, you know, all the lands that you need to play these cards, the Anointed Procession, 4 servo tokens, and you can play that servo exhibition on turn 5 and still leave up mana to play this, which could be a huge blowout on your opponent's turn. So there's definitely good things about the mechanic in the card, but really only in specific decks. Like the example I just gave, Black-White X Anointed Procession decks, is probably the best and only home, right now at least, for this in Standard. I don't think it goes in Control decks. I've seen people suggest this in Control. You essentially have to have 10 lands in most Control decks. And at that point, I don't think that that's good enough, you know. And once it actually does pop off, it doesn't ever kill the creatures that you want to kill. Like, even if you can 2 or 3 for 1, and honestly, like, if you can make this a 2 or 3 for 1 or even more, then obviously the card is insane value, but it will always leave behind the creatures you hate the most. I don't know that I like that. But as far as the card itself goes, I actually don't think that the main effect of this card, just a 3 mana instant speed edict, is bad in Standard right now. You know, we've seen throughout Standard, actually, the last few years, we've seen Foul Tongue Invocation, we've seen Fleshbag Marauder, we've seen Oath of Liliana, all of these with the exact same casting cost, but sorcery speed, and they've seen some amount of play. So this being instant speed, I could definitely see it seeing some play. Although I think the real question is it better than Doomfall currently? And I don't think it's better than Doomfall. Now, I'm usually the kind of person to where, you know, instant speed makes a card way more playable than sorcery speed, but honestly, you know, Doomfall exiles the creature that you make him sacrifice, and it has extra play against control and combo and stuff, so I just think, like, overall, it's probably a more versatile, flexible, just better card on the surface. But then again, in certain decks, like the Anointed Procession deck, this could just be a much, much better pick that can potentially end the game. You know, if you make them get rid of half their guys and you've got a board full of tokens, you probably alpha strike them. As far as other formats, I know not everybody plays Standard. There's Limited, first of all. I've seen like 2 people say that this is like bad and Limited. What are you talking about? This is splashable instant speed removal that'll always kill at least one thing. and has the chance to kill a bunch of things, so it's good and limited. It is good and limited. But as far as Commander, that's where the card can really shine because of the phrase each opponent. And also the fact that in Commander, you're way more likely to have 10 permanents. You know, Commander games tend to stretch on for some time, so you're just way more likely to actually be able to run through your game plan and get all those permanents out. So I think it's a lot. It's really good looking in Commander, and to be honest, the mechanic itself. Ascend looks really good in Commander too. Another cool thing about Commander is that, like, again, it looks like you can't lose the blessing unless there's a card that specifically says, like, target player loses the city's blessing, but that would have to come with another effect. Just that by itself would probably not be great. But who knows? Maybe a sideboard piece for, like, 1 mana. But in any case, unless there's a card that says that specifically, then it doesn't appear as though you can lose the blessing for the game, which means that multiple players can have the blessing simultaneously. So in Commander, you could have a potential situation where the entire table is blessed. And even though it looks good in EDH, I should probably at least mention that, like, again, in a vacuum, looks geared for Commander all day, but there's probably, when it comes down to it, just better choices. You know, just like play Damnation. But I guess you could play both, you know, and this is pseudo one-sided. I mean, it doesn't kill everything on the board, and your opponents will all have the best creatures. So you didn't really do as much as you wanted to at the end of the day, but it is one-sided, and that carries a lot of weight. So I guess you could just play both in Commander. You can be that guy if you want to, but at the end of the day, I think there's probably just a bevy of better options in Commander than this. But I might be wrong, and one more time, it all kind of depends on exactly what kind of deck you're building. So that's my take on it, at least. I don't hate the mechanic. I don't think it's entirely win more. I think there are decks that can punish and take advantage of this mechanic. I think that depending on what we see with Treasure, especially in this coming up set, that it might be much easier to get 10 permanents than it is at present. So I don't want to judge the card entirely just yet, because we might see some more tokens producers or who knows what. You know, we're judging this out of the context of the rest of the set, which is true of every preview that you get, but this one's a little bit more case sensitive than others because it really, really depends on what we get in the set as to whether or not this card is truly standard playable. So I'm not willing to just say that it's bad or good yet. I'm trending towards good though. As far as the mechanic goes, I think that it's got potential, and I'm not ready to hate it, although it honestly seems a little bit awkward, but it's like energy to me, and I know there are energy haters out there, but I've said before that energy is another layer, and it's another resource, and I always like that. This is another layer, and that usually tends to be good, at least in my mind. That's pretty much all I got to say about this one. Just wanted to hop on real quick, give you some of my opinions and all, and see what you guys think about this card. I want a barometer on how the rest of the community feels, because like I said, from what I've seen so far, the discussion about this card, people are really split on it, although I think that the majority opinion is relatively negative about the mechanic itself. But I do want your opinions. How do you feel about it? What are you excited to see regarding the mechanic? You know, if there's any specific things you'd like to see this mechanic do, or cards you'd like to see based around it, let me know all that in the comments section. There's an awful lot to discuss when it comes to this new mechanic. It has a lot of potential. But I'm tapped out for this one. Like the video if you like the video. Sub and ring my bell for the notifications. More Rivals of Ixalan spoilers. We should get a few of those here. Pretty decent clip coming up. I don't think the official previews start until the 1st of January, but this is a sign that we'll see some more stuff before then. So make sure that you're subbed and you hit the bell and all that stuff to get the notifications. But in any case, you can also follow me on Twitter at SBMTGDev or throw me $1 on Patreon at patreon.com/SBMTG if you want to know what videos we're doing like a day before we do the videos. And remember, this video is brought to you in part by TCG Player. They help keep the lights on, sponsor my content, all that. And even though Rivals doesn't come out until the middle of January, you can already pre-order booster boxes from TCG Player for just about $92, which is actually a pretty big discount. So if you're planning on ordering boxes anyway, I'll leave a link in the description. You can peruse their wares. But in any case, I'll catch you cats later. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Spread love. Be kind.